March 15, 1944. The Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. SS Oberführer Werner Baumbach, formerly a Luftwaffe test pilot and now liaison to Nazi propaganda, set down the intelligence report with trembling hands. The figures made no sense. The analysis came from sources in Switzerland, confirmed by multiple channels, verified against internal German production records. A single American state, California, had manufactured 300,000 aircraft in the 4 years since America entered the war. 300,000. The entire German aviation industry, operating at full capacity, dispersed across a half-dozen nations under German occupation, had produced 94,677 aircraft in the same period. This meant California alone had produced more military aircraft than Germany, Italy, and Romania combined. Baumbach reread the sentence 3 times, waiting for it to resolve into something sane, something calculable, something survivable. It never did. The report included specific figures. Douglas aircraft at Long Beach, 10,123 B-17 bombers. North American Aviation in Inglewood, 7,162 P-51 Mustangs. Consolidated Vultee in San Diego, 6,801 B-24 Liberators, Lockheed at Burbank, 9,923 P-38 Lightnings. These were just the fighter and bomber manufacturers, component factories, training aircraft facilities, reconnaissance variants, and transport conversions added another 100,000 airframes. What Baumbach didn't know was that he was holding in his hands the mathematical proof of Germany's defeat, written not in strategic doctrine, but in production schedules from Long Beach and Burbank, compiled in factories he couldn't even name located in a state he'd never visited. The German aviation industry had never faced a fundamental question because the answer had seemed impossible. Could an industrial system dedicated to civilian automobile manufacturing be rapidly converted to military aircraft production? Before 1942, the answer seemed obviously no. Automobile factories were optimized for mass production of standardized passenger vehicles, not the precision work required by combat aircraft. Converting them would require not just facilities, but knowledge, tooling, precision mechanisms, and skilled workers that didn't exist in sufficient quantity. This was what German planners believed. This was what German engineers documented in reports to the High Command. The Luftwaffe had calculated that even if America tried to match German fighter production, it would take 5 to 7 years to build the industrial capacity. Germany would win the air war years before that capacity materialized. In 1940, Germany had produced 10,826 aircraft. In 1941, when America was still neutral, Germany produced 11,776. These numbers represented the ceiling of what German planners believed possible under total mobilization. To exceed them would require violating the laws of industrial production as Germans understood them. This was what Nazi propagandists assured the German people was true. American industry, the narrative insisted, was disorganized, chaotic, profit-driven, and incapable of the systematic mobilization that German planning had achieved. The Luftwaffe Intelligence Directorate had concluded that American automobile executives lacked the discipline, the willingness to subordinate profit to production, and the organizational ruthlessness that German commanders possessed. The Reich had miscalculated in the most fundamental way. It confused German industrial psychology with universal industrial law. In 1941, a manufacturer named Donald Douglas had designed an aircraft called the C-47, a transport derived from the DC-3 airliner. It was simple, proven, and most importantly, buildable. By 1942, it had evolved into the military transport that would move armies. But the real miracle began when the automobile industry became the aircraft industry. Douglas Aircraft took the C-47 design and licensed it to Consolidated Vultee. Consolidated licensed it to Ford Motor Company. And Ford did something no German planner had imagined was possible. Henry Ford applied mass production techniques developed for automobiles to aircraft production, treating each aircraft as a single standardized product. The first C-47, built under Ford's revolutionary system, rolled off the line at Willow Run, Michigan in September 1942. Within 18 months, Willow Run alone was producing more C-47s monthly than the entire German aircraft industry produced total aircraft of all types annually. But Willow Run was just Michigan, just one factory, just transport aircraft. In California, the concentration of industrial power became almost incomprehensible. Douglas Aircraft at Long Beach was producing B-17 bombers at rates that violated German assumptions about what constituted feasible production. At peak, Long Beach completed one B-17 every 90 minutes, day and night. North American Aviation in Inglewood was manufacturing P-51 Mustangs on parallel assembly lines. Consolidated Vultee in San Diego was building B-24 Liberators alongside new transport variants. Lockheed in Burbank was producing P-38 Lightnings. Vega Aircraft was manufacturing components. Glenn Martin Company was producing additional bomber types. And countless smaller facilities, scattered throughout Southern California, were manufacturing engines, components, landing gear, cockpit systems, electrical systems, and the thousands of other precision parts that made aircraft possible. The entire apparatus ran continuously, 7 days a week, 3 shifts per day. The numbers that appeared in Baumbach's intelligence report weren't exaggerations or propaganda. They were understated. California had manufactured approximately 300,000 military aircraft and 45,000 additional transports and support aircraft during America's first 4 years of war production. The scale exceeded not just German production, but German comprehension. One factory, Douglas Long Beach, produced 10,123 B-17 bombers. Germany's most productive fighter plant, Regensburg, produced approximately 18,000 fighters across all the years of the war. One American facility had nearly matched the output of Germany's largest fighter manufacturing center. And that was just bombers, and it was just one factory. The workers in these California plants were women who had never built an aircraft before the war. They were men too old for combat or in occupations designated critical to the home front. They were immigrants, minorities excluded from other war work, and teenagers barely out of high school. They worked under fluorescent lights in climate-controlled factories, rotating shifts so that assembly lines ran 24 hours a day. They were paid union wages and received benefits. They could leave if they chose to find other employment. This was how America made war. In Germany, aircraft production relied on forced labor, political prisoners, and concentration camp inmates. Workers were conscripted for duration of service. They worked under constant threat of punishment and conscription to military service if they slowed production. The Luftwaffe had achieved approximately 25,000 aircraft production in peak years only through brutalization of a captive workforce. The Americans achieved 75,000 aircraft in their peak production years using a system that guaranteed employment at above-market wages. The factories themselves became monuments to American abundance. Douglas Long Beach sprawled across 2,300 acres. Willow Run stretched for 3/4 of a mile in one direction. The assembly lines were surrounded by parking lots that held thousands of worker automobiles, each worker driving a personal car to a factory manufacturing military aircraft while fighting a war on 2 fronts. At Douglas Long Beach alone, the cafeteria served 15,000 meals per shift. Workers received nutritious food below cost. This was considered normal. This was how a nation with limitless resources made war. When Baumbach presented the report to Luftwaffe Command, the reaction confirmed what he already knew. The figures were theoretically possible, which meant they were actually happening. which meant Germany had already lost. One general had asked the obvious question: if America is producing aircraft at this rate across multiple facilities in a single state, across multiple states, for 4 consecutive years, and we cannot match this production for 4 consecutive years, how do we win? The answer was that they couldn't. The production differential wasn't a tactical problem or an operational problem, it was a terminal condition. Germany had been defeated not by tactical brilliance or military courage, but by arithmetic, by the mathematics of industrial output, by the willingness of an entire society to subordinate everything to production, by machine tools and precision manufacturing, and the organizational capacity to train millions of workers to precision standards and manage the logistics of moving billions of parts to assembly points and coordinating the production of hundreds of thousands of complex machines. Baumbach lived through the remainder of the war as a man who possessed knowledge of an outcome that nobody possessed the power to change. California had built more aircraft than Germany could imagine existing, maintained them, crewed them, sent them to destroy German cities and German armies, suffered losses, and replaced those losses with more aircraft. Even after the costliest offensive operations, California was building replacement aircraft faster than Germany could destroy them. The state that Nazi propagandists had dismissed as a center of decadent entertainment and agricultural backwardness had become the arsenal of democracy and the tomb of the Third Reich. When Baumbach saw American bombers dropping tonnage equivalent to entire trainloads of German bombs, he understood those bombs had been manufactured in California while he reviewed their specifications in Berlin. The numbers were final. History was written in Prodi.